Good afternoon, bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Welcome to our the third installment in our ongoing free afternoon discussion artist talk series, Rue Morgue magazine, Prince Not Dead. Many of you, I'm sure like me, grew up cherishing horror publications, horror magazines. If you're of my age, because I'm quite fucking old, you were probably a monster kid. And of course, today, horror journalism has moved all but exclusively online. But there are a number of publications holding the fort and keeping genre print journalism alive. And not just alive, but essential and in demand. At the foreground of this is Canada's own Rue Morgue magazine, a publication nearly as old as Fantasia itself. I think Rue Morgue's 20 now, or maybe 22 even. We'll clarify that in a moment. Actually, yeah, because I met people in 98 from the magazine. So it's my pleasure to give the virtual floor now to some of its remarkable team. To kick things off, please give it up for Rue Morgue editor, Andrea Subasati.
Thank you, Mitch. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody tuning in. You can see me, but I can't see you. But
is it weird?
I have faith that you're there. Fellow panelists, if you could reveal yourselves, please, to help me feel a little less weird about it. 23, Mitch, you're so close.
Awesome. That's so cool.
This is our 23rd anniversary Halloween issue. Rue Morgue magazine was born 23 years ago on Halloween Day.
So you guys, so the magazine is just a year younger than us. Incredible. Yeah. Fantastic. That is heritage.
Yes, indeed. So yes, thank you. As Mitch said, my name is Andrea Subasati. I'm the executive editor of Rue Magazine at this moment. It's been a couple of years. We've had a couple of editors, all of them amazing. And I'm really proud to carry on this tradition of this magazine that was pretty much born out of the desire to provide a really holistic view of the genres, to not just talk about movies, not just talk about one thing, like we cover it all, and not just books and music and stuff like that, but lifestyle and culture. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but horror fans know that horror isn't just something that you dip into. If you love it, you love it, and you embrace it in all ways of your life. And so Rue Morgue is really dedicated to covering all of that gray space. To my left, well, I don't know if we're going to show up in the same order on your screens, but I'd like to introduce my fellow panelists. First of all, Monica S. Kubler is Rue Morgue royalty, and I'll let her take it from there.
I'm Rue Morgue I'm Rue Morgue royalty.
Bow to the queen.
I'm probably one of the only people who's done almost every editorial position at the magazine. I came on board way back in 2002 as a writer, and in 2003 I jumped on board as office manager, assistant editor, worked my way up, 2009 managing editor, straight through to 2017 when I kind of went off and started doing a bit more of my own thing and stepped back into the contributing editor role.
Yeah. And then we also have Paul Korup is a columnist. He's been a writer with Rue Morgue forever. I should know how long, but I don't. But he does. Paul.
Yeah, I'm a writer and columnist for the magazine. It's been 15 years for me. I think there was only one issue that I wasn't in that whole time. So it's been a long haul. But currently, I'm mostly doing my column, Files from the Black Museum, which is our classic horror column.
And we also have Mariam Bastani, who is in an administrative role, and she is solo in an administrative role. So she is the mad scientist flicking all the switches and pushing all the buttons behind the scenes. And there are a lot of them, and it's a tough job. Hi, Mariam.
Hi. I'm Mariam Bastani. I am relatively new to the Rue Morgue family. I relocated here from California after running a music magazine for 5 years. But yeah, I'm the person behind the curtain. I'm the one that makes sure the magazines get to where they're supposed to go, and I do all the logistical aspects of it. So distribution, and I also do part of the blog editing. So that's me.
Awesome, thank you. So we were also supposed to have our music editor, Aaron Von Lupton, was supposed to come. I just heard from him. He thought this was happening yesterday. So I don't know. I just kind of sent him a facepalm emoji, and I don't know if that means he's going to pop up in the middle of our chat. If he does, we can chat with him. And then Evan Miller, who is our games editor, is not here because he is expecting his first child right now, like right now. I'm so proud. So the Rue Morgue family is ever growing. It's really exciting and cool stuff. So today I thought what we would do is, I thought it might be interesting for people to have a peek at what it's like to keep a magazine alive in 2020. Because first of all, it's not easy, and I just want to toot my own horn like that. And second of all, I think it's not really what people think it is. I think the world of horror journalism has changed a lot. And so people have some misconceptions as to what goes into the magazine, what constitutes newsworthy stuff in the magazine. I'm sure there's people out there who are interested in the pitching process, how you can write for Rue Morgue, how you can contribute to Rue Morgue. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to have that chat. And if you're not aware, Rue Morgue is a Canadian independent magazine. We're located out of Toronto, Ontario. And so Montreal is just a couple of hours away. And so Fantasia Film Fest has been part of Rue Morgue's like history. And we would always go to that fest, and we would party it up with Mitch and all the guests. And if you've ever been to Fantasia, you know that one of the greatest things about it is that everybody parties together. You're rubbing shoulders with anybody who's around, and it's really fun and interactive. And so I really wanted to participate in spirit, even if I couldn't be there in the flesh. So maybe to begin, maybe Monica, you could kind of start with, you mentioned a little bit about your history with the magazine. Can you tell us a bit about how it's changed over the years, how your role has, I mean, you mentioned how you've worn different hats, but what were the most significant changes to the magazine over the course of those years?
Things that I would say that I had some responsibility over, a monthly book feature. Back when I started, a monthly book feature was not a given. That was something that I felt was really important. I was also back in the day kind of at the forefront of pushing for more video game coverage, because that was super important to me, because I've been playing games since I was about 8 years old and I love them. Other than that, I mean, the biggest change is that back in like 2003, when I started full time, there was no social media. That was sort of not really a huge thing yet. And over the course of the time that I started working, from the time I started at Rue Morgue to now, social media has kind of snowballed and grown into this monster and taken over everything. And if you kind of look back on over those years, it's like you can sort of see, you know, how more and more time started to get, you know, sucked into the internet machine, as it had to, because that's where, you know, that's how you advertise these days. That's how you promote these days. That wasn't necessarily the case back in 2002, 2003.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. It's something that I've really struggled with in keeping Rue Morgue really current and with it, as the kids are not at all saying. But social media, you know, like if you're a writer and your craft is mostly written, social media is very visual. And so I actually kind of struggle with, you know, on Instagram, it's like, how many times can I, you know, it's hard. It's challenging to make people care about print media. But I often find that anytime anyone holds a Rue Morgue for the first time, it's something special. They realize that there is something substantially different from holding this in your hand and reading it, as opposed to scrolling through it on your phone. And I think the internet has also, like the emergence of the blog has kind of changed the face of horror journalism, in that I think a lot of the pitches I get are like, you know what fucking slaps is Phantasm? And I'll be like, yep, what's your pitch? And it's like, I love Phantasm. I saw it when I was a kid and it scared the crap out of me, and just, yeah, cover story, Phantasm. And I don't disagree. It's just the difference between a blog and a magazine is, you know, there's only so many times we can put Phantasm on the cover of the magazine. I think we have twice or three times. I think as far as repeat offenders on the cover story of the magazine goes, Phantasm is up there. But it's not the same kind of journalism. And insofar as we are bi-monthly, so we can't be like hot off the press, here's the hot news item because we're thinking so far ahead, we do still have to kind of adopt a journalistic tone and try to speak to everybody. And but I do definitely allow my columnists to take a bit more of a conversational tone, which maybe Polly can speak to right now.
I mean, yeah, that's one of the nice things about doing a column is we don't have to be so current. I always try to do have some currency to the work itself, just because I'm trying. I don't know. It's just kind of always the way I've done my column. I specifically try to talk about classic horror films and how they have some relevance today, or can help us understand the kinds of things we're experiencing today. So there's a little bit of currency, and I try to pick films that are coming out on Blu-ray or DVD. I don't just kind of pick any random movie that I want, but I like having the kind of limited choice, or these kind of constrictions that I have to work with, because to me it makes me work a little bit harder and maybe come up with something a little bit more interesting. So there is a challenge for me in kind of balancing this. It's kind of current but not current, because I know people are going to be reading about it in 2 months, and I think Andrea and I had a conversation about this a few weeks ago when we were talking about a column that I did when we were talking about BLM protests in the U.S. and Andrea was saying, well, we didn't, this happened after we put the issue to bed. So even though people aren't going to be reading that for 6 more weeks, I felt bad. She felt bad that she couldn't address that. And I was just starting to do a little addressing of it. But who knows, when you're writing that kind of thing, like who knows what it's going to be like in 6 weeks. It's really hard to kind of make it current, but not totally current, because you don't want to date yourself so badly that it just doesn't work anymore, or it's been over. It's something that people talked about, but 2 months later nobody's talking about it because social media moves so fast. It's out of the conversation now. So I mean I do like columns with a little bit of currency and a little bit of edge to them, especially when you're talking about something like classic horror, which can just be the endless recycle of, hey, boy, Frankenstein's a great movie, right? So it makes it it gives you something better to work with, I think.
I agree. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, actually, Paul, because that's something that I wanted to mention, that Rue Morgue is a bi-monthly magazine. So this is actually the September-October edition. I have it in my hot little hands now because it just arrived in the magazine, but in my head, I am working on November-December 2020 now. So all the press releases I'm getting for, your indie album that came out last week, I don't want to talk about that in the November issue. I'm already looking past Halloween. So just something to keep in mind for as per the magazine works. And now I'm just totally distracted because Michael Gingold's face is in my face, and I'm happy to see it. I always see it at Fantasia, so I was missing it this year. How are you, Michael? Welcome.
I'm very good. I'm very sorry I'm late. I had some technical issues here. I'm very sorry.
Well, that's okay. I'll take it out of your pay. Just kidding. I feel like you don't need any introduction to the world of journalism, but perhaps you can talk a little bit about what led you to Rue Morgue.
Well, I mean, I've been part of horror journalism, I guess, since I was a teenager, because I started my own fanzine when I was in high school. And then I started with Fangoria while I was in college. And then all kinds of stuff happened with Fangoria that I'm sure people know about. And you guys were wonderful and kind of came in and picked me up at a time when I really needed you guys, and been happy to be with you since that day. It's been so much fun working with you all.
Yeah, we just plucked him out of the gutter and wrung him out and put him back to work.
Exactly.
That's how we do here at Rue Morgue. Before we go on, perhaps, I'm aware that there is a Q&A panel thing within Zoom, and there's a couple of questions in there. So if you guys have any questions for any of us or for all of us broadly, feel free to pop them in there. And maybe I'll draw from them as the chat goes, or maybe I'll forget all about them and ignore them completely. But let's take things over to Miriam, because I think, we can talk about the challenges going into the magazine, but running this ship is a big job. It's a challenging job. It's the job where she has to deal with people like you. Tell us about her.
Well, I mean, I think I do want to comment on the fact that because I also have seen the transition of, materiality, strictly materiality, to sort of digital media, but then also that in the past like 5-ish years, like zine fests and all, like all these big zine fests have been growing and growing and growing. So I think people know how special holding something and how to interact with something that's you can pick up. But that's not to say that there are so many amazing writers that have been able to, they found their medium in social media, or they found their medium in blogging. Like there are so many, like Leslie Borden is great. Her analysis, Midnight Social Distortion, those folks have found a way to, they found their medium, and they are really, really good at translating what they want to say into a medium that maybe we're not quite comfortable with. But I'm finding that the sort of dual approach is really great. So some of the writers for our blog, a lot of them tend to be quite young. And then we have like Michael, who can write for anything. He can he can do anything. So it's been really interesting to see sort of that transition to and from and back again. So I think people do appreciate that they are not getting the same things from whatever medium they prefer, and they're finding the magic of holding a magazine. It's like the same thing as like holding a record, but magazines are cheaper. So there's that I wanted to say. And also about being current, the thing that drew me to magazines in general, but particularly like zines and things, is the fact that it might, some of the topics might not be current, but magazines have the opportunity to talk about things that are universal and are concurrent, like BLM, like racial justice, like, a bunch of different things, like things that horror is very, very good at addressing in its own insidious way, right? Because we're in discomfort. When you watch horror, you want to be scared or terrified or totally grossed out. And we tend to run away from those situations, but we have the opportunity to do that. And I think Rue Morgue is of course I'm new, so I'm like amazing things about the magazine, but we have a really good opportunity and really great writers and editors that have the ability to do that. And and new people are coming on board all the time. And so it's been really cool. As far as logistics, it is challenging, especially now with COVID and everything that's going on in the States with all the mail being intercepted, I guess is the right word, and international mail being stopped. So there's that challenge as well. Like you want to hold something in your hands, but it takes about 3 weeks for the post to get it to you. So that's been challenging. And we are an independent magazine, which is great. We don't have some conglomerate funding what we do. So the opinions and everything expressed are from a place of authenticity, I would definitely say. Not to say, I'm not trying to talk shit about other magazines. I'm just saying that that's one of the greatest things about independent media, is that we have the choice to cover what we want, so.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of that. And I also think that I personally can't talk meaningfully about horror movies without relating it in some way as to what's happening in the world right now, how I'm seeing things, how I'm feeling about things. It's one thing that's great about Paul's column is that he's talking about movies from, 50, 60 years ago, but he's able to apply them to right now, to today. I try to do that in my editorials as well. And I try to do that with the magazine overall. And there's definitely been some pushback with regard to politics. I'm of the opinion that horror is political. It's always going to be political. And I don't expect everyone to agree. I think that's something that's really interesting about horror fandom. It's something that kind of rages and waxes and wanes on horror Twitter sometimes, is that I feel like horror fans, we see ourselves in each other and we think that we're alike and that we've found our tribe because we all love horror, but we are not a homogenous group. And so in putting together the magazine, I try to populate it with stories that I think will appeal to everyone in a balanced way. I don't always run stories that are especially interesting to me personally, but I'm not necessarily the target demographic. Maybe you are. What's your experience with that, Monica?
I don't know, for me in the book section anyways, which is primarily what I'm doing these days, I mean, we're every 2 months and we have so limited space for reviews. So I always find that my biggest struggle is to find a balance between mainstream horror releases that people want to know the scoop on versus also, up and coming writers. Horror has a really vibrant, small and medium-sized press scene. So making sure that we're getting titles covered from there. And, and then also looking to seeing what else is happening in the horror literature world, because sometimes those things aren't books anymore in 2020. And that was largely why I pushed for the book column back in the day, because things kept coming up that were like, well, it's not a book review and it's not really a book feature, but how do I cover this? Like if we're talking about some cool literary horror convention that's happening. So the book column for me allowed me to basically go different places talking about what's happening in the horror community. And it's also allowed me at times to, talk about some of the wilder things that have happened in the horror book community, much like you do with your editorial, Andrea.
Yeah. So I'd like to take a question from the Q&A section here. The question is, Rue Morgue being one, if not the only Canadian horror magazine, is it possible to do a segment on what is being done on the horror film in Canada or a spotlight on an old favorite Canadian film? It's a great question. Thank you, Sebastian. I try to give Canadian horror all the love that I can. There is a lot of great horror coming out of Canada. There always has been. And I think the tricky thing is, believe it or not, Rue Morgue is way bigger in the US than we are in Canada. I did some market research when I first came aboard, and we've got pretty high awareness here in Ontario, a little bit in Quebec, Western Canada, not very much at all. Maritimes, not very much at all. The bulk of our business happens in the US. And so that's not to say that I'm blowing off Canadian content to appease American listeners with American content. Rather, the problem is that I always want to feature content that my listeners, I was just doing a podcast thing earlier, sorry, that my readers can access. I don't want to talk about a movie that has no distribution in the US, because then you guys can't see it and you're reading about it and getting stoked on it, and that's a drag. So if something is coming out in Canada and not out yet in the US, sometimes I'll sit on that story, or sometimes it'll have to go to the blog for that reason. But it's a really great question. And I think it's a really great example of how, the business of horror factors into what I can put in the magazine, that it's not just, dear diary, I feel like giving a fuck about this right now. It's not at all like that. I am beholden to certain standards, and I want you guys to be able to see the content that we're writing about. But thanks for that question. But Paul runs a blog all about Canadian horror. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit, Paulie.
Yeah, I do a online website called connexploitation.com. And I've been at Fantasia in the past doing stuff related with my website. So Canadian horror is something that I'm interested in and have written about extensively, usually on my own, but I have done several pieces for Rue Morgue on the topic. And of course, there was the Horrorwood North book, what do you call those things? Rue Morgue Library. It was it's a magazine style book, but it was done by one of the other writers, Jim Burrell, who's not here today, but he put together kind of an overview of Canadian horror. So I mean, we've done stuff for sure about Canadian, and of course, my YouTube videos for Rue Morgue TV as well, which are called Connexploitation, and I spotlight a Canadian horror film in each of those as well. So we do a lot of Canadian horror, maybe not so much with the new stuff. I think, as Andrea was saying, it's harder sometimes with the distribution issues, but we've done tons of stuff on the past, and we do try to cover new stuff that's going on. And we all kind of try to stay aware of what's happening in Canada. Festivals like Fantasia and even outside of Canada, U.S. festivals too often feature Canadian films, and we always try to keep our finger on the pulse there to make sure that we're giving them some coverage in the magazine.
Cool, thank you. So another question we've got in the Q&A, I think this one is actually a bit more suited for Merm. There's less and less places that sells magazines. How do you make sure that Rue Morgue is available to the readers besides subscriptions?
You can buy from our online store. It depends on where you are in the world. You can order from anywhere in the world at ruemorgue.com. But there are also subscription services or individual vendors in other parts of the world, primarily in the UK. So if you're in that neck of the woods, you could get copies of Rue Morgue there as well. Again, you could always download the app, get a digital copies that way, which it's great because it's the same thing. Oh, not the same thing because you don't get to feel the paper. But you can hang on to those magazines that you do purchase. It's just a sad fact that magazines just aren't, it's an expensive endeavor to print something of that quality and that volume. So a lot of people are turning more towards, digital, which is great too. But yeah, it is a challenge. That is the challenge. I think that's kind of one of the concurrent themes of any panel that has to do with print media is that it is a dying art. There's a lot of, you could do DIY magazines, you can do zines, there's a lot of zine culture. You can do print to order, but that's also super expensive. So for us, the main goal is to get as much content to you for an affordable price so you will be able to come back and get more and more in this particular way and at this quality, and this particular media standard. So, it's tough. It's tough. We're trying, but it's tough. Yeah.
It is definitely a balancing act. We're trying to keep costs low to you, the consumer. And as a result, we ship in paper envelopes. I think a question that we get a lot is, can you please ship it in like a hardback bubble mailer? It's like, sure, that'll be $30 a magazine, depending on where you live. Like, that's not necessarily what you want. But MIRM is really great I know a lot of people out there are collectors, particularly when it comes to the Halloween double issue, and you want the nice crisp corners, and you don't want even, like, you're probably freaking out that my fingers are all over your magazine right now because you're going to put this in a bag and you're going to put it on the wall. I lick every single magazine, so my DNA is like all over. But yeah, if you want a perfectly crispy magazine, just let us know. We'll help you out. MIRM's your guy.
Yeah, I totally understand. There have been times where someone has looked for a particular issue and we have sent screenshots of the corners to make sure. I'm like, I think this one's better, but you might, so I get you. I'm in there with you. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I've got a question here that I can answer, but I want to make Mike answer it first. Rue Morgue has always maintained journalistic integrity in terms of not allowing advertising dollars to influence reviews. That's correct. Thanks for noticing. Has there ever been pressure from a distributor, director, etc., for more favorable coverage in the magazine in exchange for more advertising revenue?
I personally can't think of an example of that. Not with Rue Morgue. There were one or two cases in the past, years and years ago, with Fangoria, where we would hear from certain people who were interested in maybe getting a little more favorable word. I mean, it never happened. We never allowed ourselves to be bought. I certainly don't allow myself to be bought now. So no, and it can be hard. I mean, I don't want to point accusations anywhere, but you do look online sometimes and you see certain times where it looks like, well, that review or that coverage looks like it might be a little bit slanted. But yeah, I think we all try to maintain integrity because, and part of the problem is we all kind of know each other. Horror is still a very insular field, and you do wind up covering your friend's stuff every so often. And I always try, if a friend of mine has done something, if I'm in the position to assign a review, I pass it on to someone else. I try to avoid a conflict of interest whenever possible. And again, it's tough because, we all know each other. We all know a lot of filmmakers. We're all friends here. I like to think so anyway. So I think that enters into it more than any kind of commercial pressure. It's just like, you go to festivals and you meet all these filmmakers. And I will say I've had occasions where I've gone to a festival and I met a filmmaker, really got along with them great. I've hung out with them for a few days. And then I see their movie and it's like, well, So in cases like that, sometimes I might say, I should pass it on to another person to cover.
Right. I didn't mean to throw that to you as an example of somebody who's been compromised before. I guess I just meant that you, being one of our regular American writers, you do bump elbows with these people, whereas I tend not to. I think Rue Morgue is nicely insulated up in Toronto, and with the exception of Fantasia or maybe TIFF, I'm not bumping into filmmakers quite so regularly. I'm not making friends with them, so I don't really have that problem. No friends, no problems.
Oh. And I just want to say though that if you are a friend and you've made a horror film and I didn't review it, that doesn't mean I didn't like it necessarily. I want to make that clear. So, but it does happen.
There have definitely been situations where I have met a filmmaker that I've admired and they have mentioned, oh, like Rue Morgue reviewed this unfavorably, and you're a little bit embarrassed for a split second. But I think at the end of the day, everybody, filmmakers included, appreciate independent journalism and they want the truth at the end of the day. The fact of the matter is when I put out my book, when I published my master's thesis, it got a positive review in Fangoria and a negative one in Rue Morgue. I got over it. It took years for me to forgive Sean Plummer, but I did get over it. And I appreciate the integrity. I think he said that my book didn't get a passing grade. It's cool. Wow. I don't cry myself to sleep every night anymore. Another question. This is a great question. Remember the Rue Morgue Library series? You guys remember that? Rue Morgue Library was a book series that we put out. And the reason we were able to do that was because of Horror Block. And Horror Block was a subscription service where people could sign up and they would get a shoebox full of shit. They would get a shoebox full of shit every single month. And among that shit would be Rue Morgue. And it would have the issue in question, the pertinent issue. And then the Rue Morgue Library books were fitting in the off months when there wasn't a new issue. It was a book and it was a small, perfect bound. How many pages, Monica? Maybe 60, 70, like they were fatter at first.
Yeah, like about 8. They had to be perfect bound. So I'd say about 80 pages, 80 some in there.
Yeah, and they were
there's a minimum page number for perfect binding. So I'd have to say probably around 80.
Okay.
There's one right over there. I can go grab it.
Okay. They were really, really fun to do. I think they allowed us the opportunity to do deep dives on certain subjects. And yeah, see, there they are. So that's perfect. So there's an example. The Phantasm Companion that she's holding up was a bigger one. And the H.P. Lovecraft one was a little bit smaller. It was a reduced page count after a while. Horror Block went bust in the most spectacular way that a business can possibly implode. So unfortunately, Rue Morgue Library went with it. We're not closed to the idea. If things change, we would love to bring them back. I think the very first one we did was that 200 alternative horror movies you need to see. That one sold like gangbusters and people still talk about that. And I don't blame them because I still consult it. I'm still making my way through the 200 to this day. It was a really great series of books and I know you miss them. I miss them too. I hope we can bring them back. I hope we can.
Well, I have to say that doing the one I was able to do, the Shark Movie Mania one, was a childhood dream come true because when I was 12 years old, I started falling in love with horror movies. But when I was 10, sharks were my favorite thing in the world. And getting to do a whole magazine about them was just wonderful.
That's nice. Yeah, Mike did one. Monica did one, Weird Stats and Morbid Facts, which is great. Paul, did you do? You didn't do one. There's a Canadian horror one, but that was Jim.
Jim Burrell did that one.
Ah, he scooped you.
I know.
What a guy. Okay, there's another question here that I liked. Where did it go? There's all these ones that I don't like. How can teenagers like me get involved with the world of horror journalism?
Yeah.
I love this question because I've been there. I remember looking at the Rue Morgue website when websites were new and seeing the staff and just being like, if only one day I could be so validated as to have my thoughts on horror published in Rue Morgue magazine. And yeah, it happened. But before that, I had a blog, I had a book, I had a podcast, and I sure as shit wouldn't be here if I didn't have all those things. But I can elaborate a bit on that. Maybe let's start with you, Mike. What's your advice for the aspiring horror journalist?
Well, I'm from the generation that didn't have the internet when I was a teenager. So the alternative was doing fanzines. I did a little Xerox fanzine inspired by zines like Sleazoid Express and things like that. And I promoted it in Fango's Classifieds, and it kind of went out to its 100 or so subscribers. And, through that, I eventually made my way to Fango. And I think it's great today that pretty much anyone can kind of put together a blog and get their opinions and their views out into the world. The challenge is there's so many more of them. I think it's finding a way to express a distinctive voice on the subject, to bring your own point of view to it and give your own unique kind of perspective on horror, or to address a subject like a subgenre of horror or a subject within horror that maybe is not being addressed but is personal to you yourself. And the good voices are heard, and the good ones kind of rise to the top, and that's kind of a way to make your way into the horror scene in general. So just get out, start a blog, talk about maybe a movie not everyone else is talking about, find an angle not everyone else is taking, express a viewpoint that kind of comes from yourself. And like I said, you will be heard. All the good voices eventually are heard, I think.
I agree. I sure hope so. I want to hear them. I want to run them in my magazine. Monica, advice for new writers.
I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. Back when I started, I didn't go to school for writing. I have my background is in recording engineering, which is totally different. But I've always written. And back when I wanted to learn journalism, and I know they always say don't write for free, but back when I wanted to learn, I would write for anybody for free just to get those editorial notes, just to basically get editorial feedback and to learn the craft. And then once I got to a certain point where I was able to sell pitches to magazines, I stopped the writing for free business because, well, I'd learned enough that I was now able to get work placed and continue to hone my craft by getting paid work. But that was also, once again, before there were such things as blogs that you could, kind of make yourself known on. I'm old school. I came up when the internet was just we.
I would like, so I think zines are a great thing to make. Like Michael was saying, sure, there's the blog. You could start a blog, which is really super easy to do. And, it's immediate, you can do it. But you could also do zines and then find other people that are doing the same stuff, trade with them, figure out what they're into, what you're into. And that way you kind of get into that community as well. So you're already starting to write, you're doing all these things. And then, if you're in high school and you need to if you want to get credit or something for a writing thing, we don't always have room for, or spaces or projects that would be applicable, but you can always just ask people, reach out to us. I'll tell you straight up, I don't have anything that I can assign right now or give you, and always try to get, if you're young and you're not getting paid and you want to do editorial stuff like Monica did, that's a great idea. Because like she's saying, the only way to hone your craft is to keep doing it and getting the notes and getting the information from people. So that's one way, but also try to get school credit. Hit up your teachers, say, hey, I really love writing. I want to do this thing. What if I did one piece for this publication that I really love, and can I get some credit for it? And then they can actually kind of be your guide into how to write stuff as well. Use that as a tool. I mean, schools they're swamped and busy, but yeah, it never hurts to ask people, just go for it. And then if you get into a situation where every door is closed to you, you just got to make your own and make a zine and, get into that world as well. Yeah. That's how I did it. That's how I did it. I did my own zines. I did my own bands. I did everything completely DIY. And now I'm talking to you on this panel. You could do it,
True. Polly, weigh in. Nice.
It's funny because I also came up doing zines too. It's it's like half the panel. I mean, I would just reiterate, you know, I don't have really too much to add to what everybody said. It's all really great advice. You know, writing is something that you just have to constantly work at. I guess the only thing I would or emphasize is that having a really good editor, or having someone really good to kind of critique your writing and give you a fair and honest appraisal of what you're doing, is a really great way to really find that voice, or find your angle, or find the unique thing that you wanted to, that you want to bring to horror journalism. It's been really helpful to me to work with editors and have them give me feedback and say, well, why did you say that? That doesn't make any sense. And I'd say, oh yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Like, why? You're right. Like, take this out. And another great thing about doing stuff for the magazine too is that we, unlike online, you are hitting a word count, and that has also been, to me, really helpful. To me, it's all about having a bunch of restrictions, putting a bunch of restrictions on yourself, and working within those always ends up, to me, to be a better piece. If I have 600 words that I need to do for my column, and my column is at 900, I know that cutting out those 300 words is going to make my piece a lot better, because I really have to sit down and say, no, like I can't talk about this. I would love to talk about this. Can't do it. Doesn't fit. So, working with a good editor, getting, kind of steadily improving yourself. It's hard. I mean, I remember getting feedback from zines that I used to do when I was a teenager. And one guy I was so mad at, he was like, wow, it's not very good. And I was so mad at him. And it said, well, you should do this, you should do that. And years later, I thought, wow, like, he really gave me great advice. I mean, I was mad at him for 3-4 years, but, I think it can only go good for you.
Yes, I think this is a lot of great advice. And if you're like me, you're seeing a lot of similar themes running through them. Is just do it. You have to do it. You have to practice. You have to develop your voice. One thing I did that these guys didn't do, I never had a zine. I think I thought about it. Zines are such wonderful things. But I started a podcast, and I started a podcast pretty early. Rue Morgue had a podcast before podcasting was a thing. It was like, check out our RSS feed. Like, I don't even know if the word podcast existed at the time. It was just a radio show that lived on the air, and on the internet rather. And I think we were too early with it. We didn't quite know how to monetize it, how to position it, so it kind of shone bright and then it burned out. And now podcasting is like the biggest thing. And so I came from academia. I have an MA in sociology, and my book that I published is the publication of my thesis. And so for me, coming to the magazine, I had to learn to take off that academic hat and reference every single observation I make to an old dead white man, to saying, this is this because I think it is this. This is my observation. This is my thing, but it's still journalism. So I'm not using the first person, and there's that detachment there. Whereas on the Faculty of Horror podcast, we not only get academic, but we also get very personal. And then I had a blog where I would get even more personal. So I think there's something to be said for develop your craft, develop your skills, develop your voice, but be able to format what it is you have to say in different manners according to the medium. Because what you're going to run in Rue Morgue magazine is different from what you're going to run in a blog. It's different from what you're going to do in a podcast. But you can do it all, and there's room for it all. And I think it's really exciting right now that there's a huge imperative to embrace voices that haven't been heard in horror before. And I think that has everybody in a bit of a tizzy as to how it is we get there to that utopian place where everyone feels represented and everyone feels like they belong. It's a long ways ahead, but we're working on it. And I think any conscientious publisher has that as a mandate, and I certainly do. But my advice for a teenage writer is just write your ass off, participate in the horror community online. And like Mike said, if you've got stuff to say and you can say it with confidence and clarity, you'll get noticed and you'll get there. But at the end of the day, Rue Morgue magazine isn't the end all be all. Like, I only have 6 of these to make in a year. Each issue has like 3 or 4 forward-facing big fat features, and then it's all just reviews and smaller features and stuff. And so that's not a lot. I get a lot of pitches week after week. I have to say no all the time. It sucks. I hate saying no, but I have to say no a whole lot more than I have to say yes. And if I say no to you, don't let that be oh, I can't do this. You can do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't come out the way I wanted, but that's okay. You got the hint, right? Cool. Here's another question from Beth. Because you are a bi-monthly publication and aren't super beholden to the news cycle, is it better, or for better or worse? How do you prioritize your coverage, and what is your editorial planning like? I guess I'll take a swing at answering this first. As I mentioned, the first couple of features are the big forward-facing features, and of course, there is the cover story. When it comes to the cover story, Rue Morgue's covers are like legendary, for lack of a better word. We put a lot of effort into our covers. They have to be beautiful. They have to be art, and I think it matters when you're holding it in your hand. Certainly, if you collect them. I've got a wall of back issues of Rue Morgue here at the Rue Morgue Manor, and you can see, when it was a black and white Xeroxed zine that Rodrigo was doing, and then Gary Pullen came aboard, and everything got way nicer. And then, Justin Erickson came aboard, and everything got a little bit different. And then our current art director, Andrew Wright, is very gifted as well. We place a lot of effort and emphasis on our artwork. And so when it comes to the cover story, first of all, I need to fill a good 5, 6, 7 pages worth of interview for the cover story. So it needs to be a big story. It needs to be a story that's big, that I could get a big fat interview to cover all that. And I need a lot of images, not just one big, amazing, beautiful, provocative image to go on the cover, but I have to fill, there's images on every single page. So when a PR company is saying, hey, I've got this magazine, I'd like you to run coverage, the 3 big things I need are art, a screener, or a copy of the book, or the material in question, and an interview. And I would not like to tell you how many stories have died on the vine because they've only been able to give me 2 out of 3 or 1 out of 3 in my deadline. So this isn't just, I really like this, so I'm putting this on the cover. There are a lot of constraints. There's a lot of stuff that goes into what I can put on the cover. If I have a really great interview, a movie that I really love, but they can't get me artwork approved in time, I can't run it on the cover. And that has happened, and it sucks. It sucks. It wrecks my life. Anything to add to that, Monica, in terms of our decision-making process?
Other than that cover thing, it's why we never had a Cabin in the Woods cover.
Oh, is that why? No art?
The art did, there was they wanted approval for the art, and we don't do that.
No, we don't.
And then the even funnier part about that was it was a piece of Justin Erickson art, and someone later hired Justin Erickson to do some Cabin in the Woods art.
That rules.
So
it's amazing.
Anyways, that's why that movie never ended up on the cover, and that was a pretty cool cover story. The interview ended up in one of the Rue Morgue libraries.
Oh, okay.
I remember in the woods. We had so much trouble back on Fango with that one, trying to get art. And it speaks to a problem. I mean, this would be directed to filmmakers as well. I know in the internet age, there's this great urge to kind of keep things hidden, keep things, non-spoilery, and not give anything away. But there needs to be, if you're making a movie, you need to have some good imagery to get out there and share, because we wound up putting Cabin in the Woods on the cover anyway, but we had not a terribly interesting image, which I think might have even hurt the perception of the film, because that film is so subversive and goes against the grain, and everything we got from the distributor made it look like exactly the kind of generic movie that it was subverting itself. So I would say to filmmakers looking for coverage, have a certain number of really good images you are willing to put out there, because those visuals are going to sell the movie and make people want to see it. Don't share all the good stuff. You do want to preserve your secrets and some of your best images, but make sure you do have enough good photos available to get out there and to get onto covers or onto blogs or wherever they're going to be, just to create that excitement about your film, because there is so much stuff out there, and having some really good images to share is one of the best ways to kind of separate yourself.
Awesome. Great advice. You're so right. I didn't know that about Cabin in the Woods. That's amazing.
That was a specific, whenever I think of having trouble getting images to sell a film the proper way, that's the one that I always think of.
I have two little anecdotes about that that I'll share. One was when we put Hereditary on the cover. I was pretty new as editor at the time, and Hereditary blew my fucking socks off. I really, really wanted to put it in the cover. I got a great interview out of Ari Aster, and they wouldn't give me art, and they wouldn't give me art, and I was threatening to pull it and threatening to pull it, and then all of a sudden I got a piece of art, like from A24, and it was Charlie's severed head. It was from the prosthetic team. The special effects team was like, we have really high res images of the head. And I toiled with that. I was like, is it inappropriate? Is it a spoiler? Are people going to recognize? I was like, it's that or pull the story. And so we ran that on the cover, and I'm still getting shit for the spoiler on the cover of Rue Morgue. Even the Canadian distributor of the film was mad at me. I almost burned that bridge through that, and that sucked, but that's one of my favorite covers. And another cover, when we put Suspiria, the Suspiria remake on the cover, we got Rob Birchfield to do original artwork because they weren't giving us artwork. We got him to do original art, and he did, the image of Tilda Swinton with her hands like this, and it's a really beautiful, evocative image. And so I sent it in, and again, they wanted approval, and they were like, Tilda needs to look at it, and she needs to approve her likeness. And I was like, okay, well, we're standing by. We weren't standing by. We went right ahead. And because sometimes it's better to ask forgiveness than to wait for permission. Mm-hmm. That's independent horror media journalism. We can afford to be that dick.
Can I ask?
Sorry?
Sorry, can I ask a quick question on the same topic?
Yeah.
I actually wanted to ask it to Michael. So you were talking about the severed head on the cover. Now that's kind of something that's more new in the horror journalism world for print magazines, that they wouldn't want to do that. Fangoria, would always run like the money shot right on the cover of the magazine, the goriest image. It didn't matter if it was from the final seconds of the film. I don't know I guess I wanted to ask Michael, is there a shift that can you maybe explain that shift personally? Like, do you have some idea of why that's happened? We've gone from this kind of like, I want to see the most extreme gory image into, oh my God, it's a spoiler. We can't even put it on. We don't even want it in the magazine.
I think it's entirely due to the rise of the internet, and some of the very first major movie sites were things like Ain't It Cool News, which were devoted to giving things away in advance. And I think it made the entire kind of world of publicity a lot more cognizant of, not spoiling anything, because, back when there were magazines, there were only a certain number of people who had the wherewithal and the outlets to put that stuff out there. Then when the internet, anyone who started a website could put something out there. Anyone could upload something to the web. And I do recall back when Creepshow was coming out, Fango did, this was, before I was involved, of course, but Fango put dead E.G. Marshall on the cover, I think it was, and a bunch of other photos inside for an issue that was supposed to go on sale in July when the movie was going to be out. And the movie at the very last minute got bumped to October. And there were some letters that got written in for people saying, hey, how come you gave away like everything that happens in the movie? And that's the first time I can ever recall spoilers as such, though that word wasn't really used back then, being discussed. But, Fango, was devoted to money shots and putting the really good stuff out there. And, but I do think it changed because of the internet and because of people becoming much more aware and sensitive of things getting out there, and publicists wanting to have a little more control over the material and being too controlling in some cases. I remember Dimension Films was terrible, dealing with them. We covered one of the Halloween sequels and they wouldn't give us a Michael Myers photo because it would spoil the mystique of the character who had already been out in 4 or 5 movies. So, there are some and what's funny about Cabin in the Woods is that was Lionsgate, and Lionsgate almost never gave us that problem. Like with the Saw movies or whatever, they would release all the really bloody stuff. It was just that one film for whatever reason that was a problem. But that's a long answer to the basic question, and the basic answer is it's the internet, I think, that made spoilers kind of a thing that everyone became a lot more aware of.
Spoilers are a great topic and a huge topic, and a very current topic. I think more and more people are just like avoiding trailers. when it's a movie that they know that they want to see, because the trailer gives everything away. And it's something that I'm hoping to tackle one day. I really want to do a meta horror journalism issue of Rue Morgue. That's on deck for someday. But yeah, it's after 5, so I feel like we should wrap up. Any parting words from any of you to say to our readers who tuned in at Fantasia?
I want to say, I see the Q&A. I know some of these names. And I know that some of you buy the magazine, and I know some of you are subscribers. So I'm super stoked to see your names. I'm not going to name your names because it's private, but I will say hi the next time you email. Hopefully it won't be for a missing issue.
Well, I just wanted to say I'm missing everyone who was not able to attend Fantasia as a live event. That was one of the greatest disappointments of this whole thing we're going through, because it's a wonderful community, and it's great that we're able to do this and kind of have even this kind of interaction in the midst of these very, very troubling times. So so thanks, Andrea, for having me on board for this.
Thanks.
Hey, thank you to everyone who reads Rue Morgue, because if you weren't reading Rue Morgue, print would be dead and there wouldn't be this panel. So thank you for everyone reading, and everyone who stuck with us all these years, and everyone who's just finding us now. There's lots of back issues to go back to. Have fun.
Ollie?
Yeah, I don't know. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. September-October issue is on stand September 1st, but it's available for pre-order now. That's why I'm a writer. And yeah, thank you so much to Mitch and Fantasia for having us, giving us this platform for doing this. We love you, we miss you, and be sure to tune in to all the amazing Fantasia coverage yet to come. See you soon. Happy Halloween.